All right, let's dive into something really cool today. We're looking at a fascinating legal puzzle from the ancient world, and it's a really high-stakes problem, one where a single simple mix-up could cost a fortune. And the rulebook, well, it almost looks like it has a typo. Let's get into it.
Okay, so picture this. You've got one single priceless animal, consecrated and ready for a sacred offering. But then disaster strikes. It wanders off and gets completely lost in a massive herd of 10,000 other animals, every single one of which is strictly forbidden. You can't tell your animal from any of the others. So, is your offering just gone? What do you do? What's the rule here?
So to even begin to answer that, we've got to go way back, almost 2,000 years in fact. We're going to be looking at a foundational text of Jewish law called the Mishnah. This is where the ancient rabbis first tried to lay out the ground rules for this exact kind of, well, holy mix-up.
And you have to understand, this wasn't just some, academic exercise for them. This was a super serious practical problem. A consecrated animal had immense religious meaning, not to mention value. So losing it wasn't just a financial blow, it was a spiritual one. They absolutely needed clear, solid regulations for what to do.
Now here's where it starts to get really interesting. The Mishnah doesn't just give you one simple answer, it actually gives two very different answers. And which one applies depends entirely on what kind of forbidden animal your offering got mixed up with. It turns out the type of contamination is absolutely everything.
So you've got these two paths, right? On one side, there's category 1, which is just a total loss. The entire herd, everything is condemned. But on the other side, for a category 2 mix-up, the law provides this really clever workaround to actually salvage the situation. Two very, very different outcomes.
Let's start with the really severe one, category 1. The Talmudic text is, well, it's shockingly clear. It doesn't matter if it's 1 in 10, 1 in 100, or even, as it says here, 1 in 10,000. The rule is absolute. The contamination is so powerful, they all must die.
So what on earth could trigger such a catastrophic outcome? Well, it happens when the offering gets mixed with what are called benefit-prohibited animals. Think of something like an ox that's been sentenced to be stoned for a crime. You literally can't get any benefit from it. Can't eat it, can't sell it, can't even use its hide for leather. The prohibition is so absolute that its presence just nukes the whole group.
Okay, but what if the forbidden animal wasn't quite so totally forbidden? What if it was just prohibited from being an offering, but you could still use it for other things, like work, or maybe sell it? For this second category, the law gets incredibly practical. And the solution they came up with is just so clever. Here's how it works. First, you just let the entire herd graze until every single animal in it develops some kind of tiny blemish. That little blemish makes them all technically invalid for sacrifice. Then, you can legally sell the whole herd. And finally, you take the money you got for the most valuable animal, just to make sure you've covered your bases, and you use that cash to buy a brand new, valid offering. Problem solved.
All right, seems simple enough, right? Two clear rules for two different situations. But this is the Talmud we're talking about. And this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Later generations of rabbis, studying these rules in a text called the Gemara, they noticed something deeply puzzling.
They're digging into these texts, and they realize that the really severe rule, the whole total loss thing, it seems to be written down twice, in two completely different sections of the Talmud. And in a legal system where every single word is considered sacred and essential, that kind of redundancy is a huge red flag.
Just take a look at this. Over on the left, we've got the law from our text, Zevachim, saying the mixture is condemned. And on the right, there's a law from another tractate, Tamura, that says animals prohibited for the altar will contaminate a mixture in any amount. I mean, they sound like they're saying the exact same thing, so why state it twice?
And this is the heart of our mystery. On the surface, it looks like a mistake, like sloppy editing. But the rabbis were convinced that either one of these laws was totally unnecessary, or they weren't actually saying the same thing at all. And that's the puzzle we now need to solve.
You know, this puzzle really bothered scholars for a long time, until a brilliant sage named Rav Ashi came along. And he proposed a solution that was so elegant, it completely reframed the whole problem and revealed this hidden layer of genius in the law.
Rav Ashi's big aha moment was this. The two laws weren't redundant because they were secretly talking about two totally different types of prohibition. He realized the key wasn't just that an animal was forbidden, but how and why it was forbidden.
So that first law, the one in our main text from Zevachim, he said that law is dealing specifically with that most severe category we talked about, the prohibition for personal benefit. This is our ox sentence to be stoned. You can't get anything from it. It's a total write-off.
But the second law, the one from Tamura, that's talking about a much lesser kind of prohibition, an animal that is only prohibited for the altar. For instance, an animal born by a C-section was considered invalid for sacrifice. It's perfectly fine otherwise. You could use it for work or eat it, but it just can't be an offering. It's disqualified, not condemned.
And here's the absolute genius of it all. Rav Ashi explained you need both laws to have an airtight legal system. Think about it. Without the first law in Zevachim, you might logically think that the harsh 1 in 10,000 rule only applies to holy things on the altar, but not to regular everyday use. And without the second law from Tamura, you might think that extreme rule only applies to those really, really bad, benefit-prohibited animals, not to ones that are just disqualified from the altar.
They fit together like two perfect puzzle pieces. Each one addresses a specific scenario and closes a tiny legal loophole that the other law, all by itself, might have left wide open. What looked like a simple mistake, a redundancy, was actually a sign of incredible precision. So let's just zoom out for a second. What does this incredibly detailed legal debate from thousands of years ago actually tell us? Because it really is about more than just ancient sacrifices. It's about an entire philosophy behind building a system of law.
This whole exercise is basically a masterclass in the value of absolute precision. In this way of thinking, there are no wasted words. Every phrase has a specific purpose. Every repetition has a hidden reason, and what looks like a contradiction on the surface is really just an invitation to find a deeper, more sophisticated logic hiding underneath.
Ultimately, this ancient puzzle shows us a legal system built on these 4 amazing pillars. First, there's precision, where language is this incredibly exact tool. Then there's comprehensiveness, the drive to account for every possible scenario. Third, a surprising amount of practicality, always offering a workaround if one is possible. And finally, a deep commitment to logical rigor, this belief that any puzzle can be solved if you just think about it hard enough.
And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. In our modern world of fast takes, short summaries, and 280-character arguments, what can this ancient, meticulous debate teach us about the value of precision? Not just in our laws, but in our contracts, and maybe even in the way we talk to each other every single day. Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.